Hey, welcome back to That's Not Proper, and I'm your host, Corey Assumption. Today is my podcast 1 year anniversary. On this day, 1 year ago, I released my very first full episode. Technically, the podcast began on September 22nd when I released a trailer, but the very first episode occurred on September 25th, 2019. Absolutely crazy, and I'm super excited about it. When I first began this podcast, I set out with a goal to just start. It was kind of haphazard in the sense that I didn't have a lot of background knowledge with regards to podcasting, to recording, to editing, to social media, all of that stuff. I'd been thinking about a podcast for, 5 to 7 years, but I was afraid. It was kind of a scary thing to put myself and my opinions, my beliefs, my feelings, my changes, my personal life, intimacy, all of that kind of stuff out there for potentially the entire world to hear. There are some, I don't know, I guess you could call them unwritten rules in the world of podcasting. And I had done a lot of research prior to beginning the podcast, how to do it, where to sign up, how to get a host, websites and email addresses, social media, the tools I would need for editing, for recording. And it was a lot. But in all honesty, the way I learn best is actually doing it. And so sometimes reading and watching YouTube videos, as helpful as it may be, I learn better when I'm actually thrown into it. And so I didn't follow all these unwritten rules. In all honesty, going back, I would probably follow some of them. Things like have a bunch of podcast episodes already edited, recorded, and ready to go when you begin. Yeah, that would have probably lightened my load a little bit because I didn't do that. I was doing it every week. I would, had these topics written down and I would just sit down and I would record. And at the beginning, most of my episodes were all solo episodes. And a lot of it was in the beginning for the first season, kind of allowing listeners to figure out who I was and where I was coming from, but also in the hopes that they could relate, because I truly believed that there were other people out there that were feeling the same way I felt, but didn't really know how to express it, or maybe they were afraid, kind of like how I was for many years, afraid of expressing exactly what I thought, exactly what I felt, the changes that I was seeing in myself and in my family. And it wasn't like midlife crisis because I'd hit my 40s. That's not what it was. It was a revelation, an awakening. My first episode, I talked about an awakening. I read a poem, and actually that was the trailer episode. And that poem still rings true for me. There's an awakening that occurs in some people. And that's what I felt, was like, wait a second. There are so many things that I have believed, that I've trusted, that I've done my entire life, especially as an adult. And I think I erred, or I think I was convinced of things that weren't true. Some gaslighting, some lies told, some life lived that I knew wasn't authentic or wasn't my purpose, but I lived it because I felt like I had to or I was supposed to. I was a little bit afraid of being looked at as too different. Being different and a little bit odd and a little bit out there, something kind of I've always been told I am, but it's more like on the comical side. I can be a little bit goofy. I'll have random thoughts and I'll just share them. But this was different. This was going to mean that many of the things that I had said and done and the way I had lived my life was polar opposite. And I needed to confront that, and I needed to share it because I knew I wasn't alone. And this past year has been an amazing learning process for me. Tons of self-reflection, lots of education, and some of that self-education, some of it's being educated. taking this knowledge that I'm getting, this information that I'm getting, and finding out if it's true, if it's right, if it's just, if it's in line with what I believe my purpose and my passion is. And some of that I'm still figuring out. But so much change has happened over the past year. And it's weird with change like this sometimes, because initially, and as you're going along, you don't really see it because it's happening. And some of it felt like it was so fast and it was so vastly different from how I had been before. But it also seemed small. And I don't know if that was because I looked at myself as small, still figuring some of this stuff out. But when I took a moment, especially over this past week and the past several weeks, honestly, as I've been considering the fact that this goal I set out to do, to just start a podcast. And then later on, as the podcast went on, I said, you know what? I want to do this for 1 full year and then assess myself. What have I done? Have I provided anything for anybody else out there that maybe feels the same way I do, that can relate? Have I done anything that is a benefit? I'm not here to just blab on. I could blab on, but I'm not here for that. I'm here in the hopes of change in myself, change in society, change in listeners, change in my family. I want change. I don't think that there's any movement forward without change. Growth is change. And so I was able these past few weeks to kind of look back and go, holy shit, so much has changed. I've achieved goals that I never even considered achieving before. The podcast was one of them. My mindset, my gosh, so much change. The way that I view society, good and bad, definitely changed. My desires going forward, huge change. And even now, I've made some recent changes in my own personal education and reflection, and my partner and I are moving forward with some serious change in our life, and it's crazy exciting. I'd love to divulge more information with regards to that, but that's for another podcast. Podcasting is not for accolades, just so everybody knows. In fact, many indie podcasters like myself, we're not making money on this. In fact, most of us are putting money out without getting any return. We're not, across the world in the news and in the media in big ways where everybody hears and sees. Some of us are just hitting a small audience, but that small audience is change. And so my desire was, if just one person listens, if one person feels heard, if one person feels like, you know what, I feel the same, I have the same struggle, I have the same fear, I have the same desires, I have the same thoughts, and they know that they're not alone, I did what I set out to do. I have received accolades, and that's exciting, and it's nice because it helps you to press on, but that's not why I do it. Because in all honesty, if anything, I've put a heavier load on myself. Podcasting is difficult. Please be aware, this is not a complaint, but it is difficult for me. I have a big family. I have some responsibilities, some big responsibilities, some 24-hour, 7 days a week type of responsibilities. But what podcasting is it's a passion. And so you get in there and you research and you talk and you share and you gain insight. And you meet some really, truly amazing people. I have met people that there is no possible way I would have ever even remotely met had I not been a podcaster. My life has been personally affected and changed by people that there is no way I would have met had I not been a podcaster. Especially during this whole COVID thing. All my interactions are, via social media, podcasting, conferences, groups and sessions and things like that. And even still, there's these friendships being created. And I value them in a way that I never even considered I could possibly do. In all honesty, when I set out to podcast, I had no idea I'd really meet anybody. I figured, if I do this 100% alone, well, I do it 100% alone. But I was gifted with so much more There are people that I've met through podcasting that I know will be on my mind for the rest of my life, that I will look back upon with love and appreciation and thankfulness because they have had an impact. And just in simple ways, simple things like telling me, Corey, that was a great episode. Or even, laughing with me, jokes, funny emojis, whatever it is. Coming on to the podcast, and when we do interviews, usually before the interview and after, we have a little bit of time where we chit chat. And even in those few moments, there's a connection that's been created that I could not have had before, and I value it. With podcasting, I have been able to look at myself. I've been able to check out my own biases, judgments, whether or not I seek to grow or lay here stagnant. I've been able to experience some serious highs and lows. And it's been something that for the rest of my life, I will be able to look back upon with incredible thankfulness. I have no idea where this podcast will be going. And in all honesty, it's irrelevant. I feel like what I desired to set out to do, I did. And so for a moment, I will pat myself on the back a little bit because it wasn't easy. I had a goal. I feel like I went past that goal. And not just for myself, but for other people. When someone leaves a review or comments on a post or messages me privately or in an email and tells me something new that they have learned or how much they've appreciated something or that the topic discussed and the guests that I had on have made an impact on them, that wasn't possible the moment before they turned that podcast on, the moment before they hit play. That is immeasurable to me. There is no monetary value I could place upon that. And so I'm thankful. And so I share all this information, and there's so much more. I could go on and on for hours, I'm certain. But in all honesty, what I want to share with everyone is how much I appreciate my listeners, my supporters, my guests, heck, even my haters. It doesn't even matter to me. I am so thankful and so overjoyed and so excited about what is going to happen in the future for myself and for my family. I'm excited for my listeners. I'm hopeful that there's something that has come across with these episodes over the past year that has affected them in a way for positive change. And so I want to thank all of you for how you have affected my life for better. Thank you so much for listening to this week's short episode of That's Not Proper. And thank you for celebrating along with me with our 1-year podcast anniversary. So very exciting. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review to That's Not Proper. And check me out on social media on Instagram and Facebook at That's Not Proper. And remember to come back for the next episode of That's Not Proper.